In February 1998, Bin Laden issued a religious statement, a fatwa, against all Americans and what he called the Jews and Crusaders.
He threatened to kill them, all of them. He considered them atheists, non-believers, and they are against Islam, and he's going to fight them.
But many Americans had never heard his name until August 1998, when two huge car bombs devastated the U.S. embassies in Kenya and Tanzania, killing 224 people and injuring hundreds more. This was to become the hallmark of al-Qaeda, multiple simultaneous and massive attacks designed to cause maximum death and destruction. Bin Laden was put on the FBI's most wanted list. Tragically, there were a number of opportunities to stop him before 9/11.
Between May of 1998 and May of 1999, we had, by my count, 10 opportunities to either kill or capture Osama bin Laden. Not only clear opportunities, but easy opportunities.
When evidence showed that al-Qaeda was responsible for the two U.S. embassy bombings, President Clinton ordered retaliation. America went on the attack, launching 88 cruise missiles into Afghanistan and Sudan. But instead of killing bin Laden, they hit a civilian factory. The tragic misfire made the U.S. government skittish about these kinds of operations moving forward. Mike Scheuer maintains that in late December 1998, the CIA had good intelligence of where bin Laden was staying the night.
On the Sunday before Christmas, we certainly could have killed him. He had gone up to Kandahar from his farm. We happened to have information from a human asset about which wing of the palace he was in and which room. That information was taken to the White House, and what we were told was they decided not to shoot because there was a mosque about 300 meters away from the palace. They somehow worked themselves into paralysis by imagining that if shrapnel from a missile scratched the mosque, the Muslim world would rise up in righteous anger.
By the year 2000, the U.S. was increasing the use of its newest weapon, unmanned drones known as Predators that could stream live pictures from bin Laden's hideout in Afghanistan directly back to Washington.
There were occasions when you would make the drive into CIA headquarters and you look at the live video feed from the Predator. On one occasion, we were able to position the drone over Tarnak Farm, and we were able to see bin Laden arrive.
But they couldn't be certain, and since the Predator was unarmed, carrying out a cruise missile strike would take 6 hours. The head of the CIA at the time, George Tenet, insisted that there needed to be enough confirmed intelligence to pinpoint bin Laden's location before launching a strike.
When we briefed Mr. Tenet, when Mr. Tenet examined the information himself on each of these 10 occasions, he said he was convinced by it and said that he would tell the White House that the information was as good as it's going to get. And on each occasion, the government decided not to shoot. I think this is where a lot of the conspiracy theories come from. But the problem we have to this day is presidents who are moral cowards and more worried about the world, what the world will think of them, than protecting Americans.
But Francis Townsend strongly refutes this assessment.
The president was absolutely determined to give the capture of bin Laden 100%, 110% effort for many reasons. It wasn't that the organization wouldn't go on, but it certainly would have weakened and fractured the organization. And let's not deny ourselves that there was an element of retribution to this. The American people had a right to see justice.
And America's best chance for justice may have come just 3 months after 9/11, when this man became the last person to intercept a private communication from Osama bin Laden. Dalton Fury is not his real name, and because he served for 15 years in the highly secret Delta Force, for security reasons we cannot show his face. After the 9/11 attacks, Fury was commander of 54 American Special Operations personnel who were closing in on bin Laden in Afghanistan.
I was given the honor of being the ground force commander. We were given the mission to kill or capture Osama bin Laden in the Tora Bora Mountains of Afghanistan.
In November 2001, Osama bin Laden was seen for the last time in public in Jalalabad, eastern Afghanistan. Then he retreated to his old mountain base, known as Tora Bora, just 10 miles from the Pakistan border, This was where he'd fought the Soviets years before.
We weren't positive until we actually heard Osama Bin Laden on the radio, a short-range, unencrypted radio that he was clearly using as he gave commands. It was obvious it was him. When you have the local mujahideen holding up the radio and having everybody gather around like a rock stars on television, when you have a CIA operative who studied his voice for the last 10 years and they all tell you it's him, it's him.
The Bush administration strategy: Afghan troops would front the mission backed by a small number of U.S. Special Forces directing massive airstrikes. The Taliban fell in just over 2 months. Now, with bin Laden cornered, American officials insisted on sticking to their plan. But according to the man on the ground, Afghan warlords on the US and British payroll weren't up to the job.
General Hazar Ali was paid $4 million United States dollars to rent his leadership and his men. Haji Zaman Ghamsharik, supported by the United Kingdom, was paid $2 million.
It was going to prove a very costly mistake. Less than half of the 2,000 Afghan troops promised ever materialized. Worse still, they went home every evening.
They were reluctant to go in the mountains. They were afraid of Al-Qaeda at night. We were in the middle of Ramadan, which was a perfect excuse to leave the battlefield at night.
This is the Pakistani border and multiple infiltration routes across the Pakistan.
Back in Washington, Hank Crumpton, the CIA's head of operations in Afghanistan, had an urgent meeting with President Bush. Crumpton wanted to use U.S. troops to help seal the border to prevent bin Laden escaping into Pakistan.
My men at Tora Bora communicated directly to me back at CIA headquarters and expressed very clearly that we needed to put U.S. troops on the ground.
Crumpton showed the president a map. On it, he pointed out scores of escape routes.
I thought it would be impossible for us to block all of them, and I maintained we needed to move very quickly and we needed the troops now. The president asked me, do we have sufficient troops there? And I said no.
There were thousands of U.S. troops in the region, but the order never came. And that wasn't the only strange decision that Dalton Fury's team had to deal with.
We first requested to go in from the south side over the 14,000-foot peaks to get the drop on bin Laden and Al-Qaeda from behind.
That was denied. Special forces weren't allowed to fight face-to-face with Al-Qaeda. They also were denied mortars and mines to block escape routes.
In Delta, it's usually very odd that operational requests like that are denied if they're available.
And then a number of troops, planes, and other assets were actually withdrawn from the country.
This crazy idea that bin Laden would see that the Special Operations Task Force had left the area and it's okay to come out and play. Very naive. Those things collectively, I think, constrained us operationally to the point where we're almost destined to failure.
This top hill, very top up there, that's supposedly where bin Laden's hanging out.
This is video filmed by Special Forces at the time.
We've seen movement along this saddle right here.
Against the odds, US and UK Special Forces penned in Al-Qaeda, directing huge airstrikes, killing many Al-Qaeda fighters. But just then, the Afghan warlords agreed on a ceasefire, allowing bin Laden to move back and many of his fighters to escape. Bin Laden was heard for the last time on the radio, and the next day he actually signed and dated his will.
On the 14th, we think we were roughly 800 meters from when he went into the cave, which we're pretty sure it was him along with his entourage and his personal security.
The Americans called in a massive air attack. US officials now believe bin Laden survived and slipped out of America's grasp into Pakistan. He has never been seen verifiably since.
Clearly, there was more that we could have done. Sadly, with only a handful of American forces. We relied on some of our Afghan forces. Some of them, in retrospect, we know, were influenced by Al-Qaeda. Some were paid off, and bin Laden was allowed to escape.
By all accounts, the failure to capture bin Laden at Tora Bora was a strategic blunder military commanders feel could have been prevented. As it turns out, the CIA did a background check of the 2 Afghan warlords, and the man who ran the check said they couldn't be trusted.
A couple of gentlemen named Haji Zaman, and the other one was named Hazrat Ali. They had fought against the Soviets. One of them had fought with Osama bin Laden during the 80s, and both of them were related to an Afghan leader called Yunus Halas, who had always been very close to Osama bin Laden. So these Afghans were likely to be a day late and a dollar short.
It's pretty clear people were frustrated because everyone believed in the operational moment of Tora Bora that bin Laden was prepared to die, he was ready to die, and they felt, Al-Qaeda and those immediately around bin Laden felt very threatened. And he got away, he escaped the net. And so we have to regard Tora Bora as a failure.
If he thinks he can hide and run from the United States and our allies, he will be sorely mistaken. There's no question in my mind we'll have the resolve.
Who would believe that both the President of the United States and his top generals would not use the military that Americans paid for to defend Americans? It's almost unbelievable, but that's what